Hey guys, welcome back to another Shadowlands Mythic Plus commentary video. So this key is a Necrotic Wake 16. I haven't had a lot of time to run with my regular push group, so this is just a pug, and because of that, it's not the cleanest key, obviously. So that's what happens when you're with a bunch of people you don't know, you're not familiar with each other, and there's less communication and all that, so you don't know what to expect in every pull from everybody, and sometimes it can cause a bit of antics. Like right there, our Death Knight has already died because he got aggro from something. So this first pull is pretty big. Basically, I'm just gonna Shadow Crash. I pop my cooldowns for this because we've got time before the first boss, which is the next time that I'm gonna want my cooldowns up. So I pop my cooldowns for that, and then I basically just spam Searing Nightmare. So that's like all I do during that first pull, and it does good damage. So you want to have your Void form up before you use your Shadow Crash so that you get the most out of your mastery, but other than that, it doesn't really matter. Like right there on that pull right there, I Searing Nightmared one time so that everything got Shadow Word Pain on it before I Shadow Crashed, just so that I get a little bit more damage out of my mastery than I would without Shadow Word Pain on everything. So I'm just gonna put Vampiric Touch on everything and then start spamming Searing Nightmare. We need to kick these Drain Fluids, but we don't have a ton of kicks. We have a Fire Mage and a Shadow Priest, which means our kicks aren't as frequent. We also have a Priest Healer, so we don't get a kick from like a Shaman, which means that it's going to be hard to stop all these Drain Fluids. Luckily, we can Psychic Horror and Psychic Scream the Drain Fluids to stop them, although I'm not stopping that one and it ends up killing our healer, so I could have Psychic Screamed there and potentially kept him alive, but other than that, yeah, basically we're just going to do regular rotation, Vampiric Touch on stuff, and then try to snipe things with Shadow Word Death as they're dying. My cooldowns are coming up right now, but I'm not going to use them for this pack because we're about to move on to the boss. Also, I'm running the Void Tendril Legendary still. I just crafted the Power Infusion Legendary, Twins of the Sun Priestess. I crafted that this week, but I was really hoping to use it with my push group so that I can communicate, hey, I don't have Void form up soon, but I know our Fire Mage has Combust or whatever, so I'll use Power Infusion on him. But in a group like this, where there's not a ton of communication, I don't really feel like I can get the most out of my Power Infusion by using it on someone else. So I'm opting for the Void Tendril Legendary instead. Although I would like to start running the Power Infusion one more. The only problem is, because I crafted the Void Tendril Legendary for the wrist slot, I had trouble finding another wrist piece that I could wear instead of the Legendary, so that I could run the other Legendary, the Power Infusion one, which I put on shoulders. But I ended up just doing some PvP and buying one of the PvP pieces so that I could have a 200 item level wrist. Anyway, so in this pull where it's just like 3 mobs, so I'm Searing Nightmaring if I can. I'm Mind Searing, Shadow Crash, saving both my cooldowns, Power Infusion and Void Form, because we're about to go into the boss. And it's nice and simple. I should have Searing Nightmare there more. It looked like nothing had Shadow Word Pain on it for pretty much that whole pull, which is not good. But not a huge deal, I guess, and something to work on in the future. So for this Prideful, I'm going to use pretty much all of my single target stuff that's not my really big cooldowns. I am running Shadow Fiend instead of Mindbender, so I'm not going to use that here because it's a 3-minute cooldown. But I am going to use my Trinket and then my Void Torrent and Mind Games even. And then Dissonant Echoes whenever I can, and just clean up this boss, this Prideful, really quick and easy. I managed to dodge that Prideful thing, so that's good. Here we're moving into the boss. I'm gonna pop my pot, and then Power Infusion, Vampiric Touch, and then straight into Void Torrent. And now I'm just going as fast as possible through my single target rotation. So I get the Heaving Wretch on me, which you typically want to point into the wall so that the worm dudes are all stacked up, but because we had him kind of far out from the wall, it made it kind of hard to do that. But I pointed them, I think, in a decent way, so we managed to kill him like super quick. Plus the fire mage was combusting and ignite spread and just totally murdered them. Yeah, so now I'm out of void form, which means I'm going to start working on other stuff, like I throw in my mind games now that I'm out of void form. I'm void torrenting. While I'm in void form, I'm not using void torrent or mind games pretty much ever, because I'm trying to get as many mind blasts and void bolts as possible. Those are like the only two spells I really want to cast inside void form. Right here, I'm in like a really weird spot where I can't walk anywhere, so I Door of Shadows out, which is pretty nice because I'm a Venthyr. Then I immediately Void Torrent. Right there, I had like 2 different Void Torrent lines going on. There's like a weird graphical glitch with the Void Torrent, where sometimes it makes 2 different Void Torrent lines, even though it's still doing only 1 set of damage. Okay, so we killed that boss, nice and easy. We're going to move on to a pretty big pack here. Right there, I should have held my Shadow Crash for after 1 Searing Nightmare, so that I did a little bit more damage, but it's not a huge deal. Right now I'm just spamming Searing Nightmare on everything. I'm not applying Vampiric Touch, although I probably should be at this point, now that there's, and I did just right there. There are 5 mobs left, so as long as, I should Vampiric Touch the ones here that are gonna live more than 12 seconds. So like this one I'm focusing and Circle probably, but everything else probably wouldn't have lived that long, although it seems that maybe I could have just Vampiric Touched everything there and been fine. I end up doing decent damage, and the Fire Mage blows me out of the water because he combusted, so not too bad, but could have done more, I guess. So our Demon Hunter in this key is Kyrian. He goes to use the Kyrian thing here. His guy starts repairing the dude, and if you watch closely, the guy just runs off and doesn't actually repair the golem. So right here, we would typically be waiting for the orbs to come out of this guy, but the guy just ran away, so we don't actually get the orbs right now. So he's asking if anybody else has Kyrian. Nobody does. So he's like, well, I guess we'll just pull without the orbs. And so we're going to move into this pull. I'm going to try and single target down Skull right here because, and I pop both cooldowns because this is pretty deadly. And Skull is inspired, so we can't kick any of the Frostbolt volleys or anything. So really, any of the damage you do to all the other stuff that is going to die when you kill that inspired mob doesn't matter. So I'm not going to AoE anything. I'm just going to try and single target that guy and then, get these other guys when I can. So, it can be really tempting to, start spamming Searing Nightmare there, for instance, because there were, 8 or so mobs, but it's not worth it, because as soon as you kill that inspired guy, the other ones are going to disappear. So, effectively, they have 0 HP, because any damage you do to them doesn't matter, right? Their health is whatever health the inspired guy is. So then our Demon Hunter goes back with the Kyrian thing and opens the Golem dude up, and we get the orbs. I've never seen that bug before, so it's interesting. But right there, I Shadow Crash again. I should have waited for stuff to move before I threw it, so that it didn't only hit one guy. And now I should be moving into Searing Nightmare spam. There's 5 or so mobs, so I've got Vampiric Touch on some stuff that's going to live a while. I get a couple procs from my legendary here, which is nice, and will inflate my damage a little bit. I managed to kick that Fear right at the very end. And then, yeah, I'm just focusing these 2 guys down, just regular rotation. I should have put Vampiric Touch on them maybe a little bit sooner than that, but they did die pretty quick, so I guess it wasn't a huge deal, but who knows. So right here, the DH is saying we want to Invis Pot the bridge, but we can skip those 2 guys with Mind Soothe, and then the DK gets, and my Invis Pot is on like a 30-second cooldown right now. So I thought he meant to Invis Pot these guys and walk all the way to the boss, but we don't need to Invis Pot the pack before. It's really confusing, so we Mind Soothe these 2 guys. Our DK is on the other side thinking he can't walk by, but he can because they're Mind Soothed. And so I'm honestly not sure where the Demon Hunter wanted to Invis Pot here. If he wanted it for this pack, or if he wanted it for these 2 guys, because we end up pulling these 2 guys right here anyway. So I'm really not sure what he wanted. It could be that he just didn't know that we could Mind Soothe past instead of Invis Pot, and he wanted us to Invis Pot there, but I don't know. So right here I'm going to pop both cooldowns, just because we have some time before the next boss, at least 2 minutes. I should pop Shadow Fiend here, although I'm not sure if I do. That's something that I need to work on more. When I'm running Mindbender, it's really easy for me to pop Mindbender on cooldown, just because it's like a 1 minute cooldown, and I feel like it's no big deal. But when I'm running Shadow Fiend, it's a 3 minute cooldown, and because it's a 3 minute cooldown, I'm really hesitant to use it ever, because I want it on the boss, and that's something that I should work on doing better, is using it more often. Because as long as I have it up for the bosses, I can use it at other places, and it's fine. So like on that pull, I should have popped the Shadow Fiend as well, because we probably have at least 3 minutes before the next boss. But oh well. That's why we watch these videos, is to learn. So now we're on the Prideful. I'm just trying to keep my dots up. I'm standing in this barrier for some damage reduction. But yeah, it's just the typical thing. I'm saving the spear that I picked up, hopefully for the boss. I think I use it when we pull the boss. There are some interesting strategies with this thing. Oh, I end up popping my Shadow Fiend there, which is, it looks like I realized that we might have some more time, and I end up using it, so that's good at least. I would have preferred to use it on the pull before this one, though, so. Because already my Void form is back up, so it's been at least a minute and a half since that 2 mob pull that we did, so I could have potentially had 2 Shadow Fiends before the next boss. This Reaping Winds will still pull you in after the mob is dead, which is something I found interesting right there. That big guy was just a single target fight, so I was just doing my single target rotation. I pop Void Eruption here again. Searing Nightmare spamming. I'll probably Power Infusion myself, yep, as soon as it comes off cooldown, I do. I use my Trinket, and then, yeah, I'm just Searing Nightmare spamming and getting Vampiric Touch on everything, and then Void Bolts as often as possible, because I'm running Hungering Void. So, while I'm in Void form, I need to use my Void Bolts as much as possible. So, right here is like my favorite pull in a Necrotic Wake for Shadow Priest, because you could just spam Searing Nightmare like crazy and do a ton of damage to these shuffling corpses. But the Fire Mage combusts there and does like 30k DPS, which means that I don't get the chance to do 30k DPS, which is not so bad, but I mean, it's good that he does a ton of damage because they die quicker, so not a huge deal. And then, yeah, we clean up the other couple guys. Somebody hopefully will grab this spear. For anyone who's not sure, the spears will do a bunch of damage to whatever they hit and anything they pass through. So if you have a line of mobs, you spear the one in the back, and anything the javelin goes through will get hit, and it'll do a ton of damage to them. So there are some really cool pulls you can do, like upstairs after this boss, where you can get just a ton of mobs and bring them all close to each other and throw a spear at the one in the back and just annihilate everything. But we're going to try and save this spear that I've got for the boss, because the other side effect of the spear is that after it hits whatever you throw it at, that thing takes more damage for a certain amount of time. So right here, I'm popping Void Torrent, just the single target rotation again. Keep Vampiric Touch up, Shadow Word Pain, and then Mind Blast and Mind Flay as much as possible. Saving my Dark Thoughts procs for my Mind Flays. Something I did not so well in this run would be I didn't use Vampiric Eruption like at all, very rarely at least. So that's something I could have done better, but I was not using it. So on that Prideful, for instance, would have been a good time to use it, help with healing. It'd be good to have it up for this boss, because this boss is probably the scariest part of the whole dungeon. So I throw the Javelin. He's got 15 seconds where he's taking increased damage. And then, yeah, this is just like your straight up raid boss rotation. Dot it, Power Infusion myself. I'm going to shackle this reanimated mage. Ends up not mattering because it gets gripped in. So I shackle the other one, and then it gets broken. So I decide, I guess they just want us to kick it and kill it. So that's something you can do on this boss. If you shackle any of the mages or any of the undead stuff that he spawns, then when he casts the thing that makes them explode, they don't actually explode. This final harvest thing, if it's CC'd like over on the side, it's not going to explode and kill everybody. So that's one way you can avoid having to kill this stuff, is if you just shackle undead. One of the mages is typically what I do, because the mages are the most deadly for sure, because they have their frostbolt volley, which is really, really bad. I go to shackle another mage, and so I shackle that first mage, but then the boss gets pulled over to it, so I go to shackle the other mage, and we pull that one in with grip. So right here I'm going to get hit by this breath. That was really bad by me. I should have stood closer to the boss, but it's kind of hard to see a lot of this stuff when you've got all these ads and everything. I do manage to live, which is good. I popped dispersion there and stayed alive, so that's good, but I shouldn't have been hit by the breath in the first place. And then yeah, we're about to finish up this boss. I should pop Void Eruption right there so that we can finish this boss before the end of this phase. And if we were in a coordinated group right here, we would probably... Oh, that Frostbolt volley gets off and almost wipes us. See, that's why I shackle one of the mages every time, so that doesn't happen. And if we were in a coordinated group, like I was saying, we would just say, ignore the ads, we're just going to burn the boss. And that's what we end up doing here anyway. And it works out. So we end up killing that guy before he casts Final Harvest. So, and then our DH is like, we need percentage before we go up, because I think you need something like 69%, 70%, something like that before you go up, or else there's not enough trash up there for you to finish your count for the dungeon, and you'll have to kill the last boss and then teleport back to the beginning. So we come back down here to do this fight, this pull right here, and I Shadow Crash there and get a crit, which is nice. I'm going to Mind Sear and start spamming Searing Nightmare. I Vampiric Touched everything because there's only 4. And then, yeah, you want to kick these Rasping Screams. You want to kick the Bone Mender anytime he casts Bone Mend. Yeah, and then I'm going to Shadow Word Death stuff as it dies. He gets a Bone Mend off, which is why he's still alive. He gets another one off, and we end up killing him. And he was casting even another one there, so... Right now, our Fire Mage is really popping off. He's doing like almost 8k overall DPS, which is crazy. And then I'm at 6.1k, which is pretty good, and our DK is at 5.6k. So yeah, right now the dungeon is going pretty well. We've had 4 deaths, which is less than ideal, but not terrible. And I've misplayed a little bit, like that boss, Amarth or whatever. I didn't do... Like, I got hit by the Necrotic Breath and everything, so I misplayed there. And I'm sure there are other things that I did wrong, but so far, I mean, it's going pretty well, so we're just going to clean up this trash up here before we start working on the boss. This is a good time to pop Power Infusion and Void Eruption, because there's these 4 trash packs, or like 6 trash packs or something around the room. And then after all that trash, there's going to be some RP with trash packs in between. So we've easily got 3 minutes plus before the next boss. So I should be popping Shadow Fiend here, but I am not currently, so that's a mistake. Right here, our tank is going to go down because he has a bunch of Necrotic, and he's got 2 stacks of the... I think it's the Tenderize? Yeah, it looks like the Tenderize. So he's about to go down right here. There's like nowhere he can kite. He's asking for the DK to taunt, and the DK taunts the other thing. I think he wanted him to taunt the big guy, but he ends up taunting one of the small dudes. So he goes down. I fade immediately so that I don't have threat. And then, yeah, we could finish this pull without the DK, so not a huge deal. But that's something to keep in mind while you're doing Necrotic Wake. Necrotic Wake the dungeon with Necrotic the Affix. When you're in this room, it's kind of hard to kite. A lot of these mobs are really, really fast, and there's like no room. So it's weird. I don't know what they changed in Shadowlands that's different than BFA, but for some reason, a lot of the trash is just like Usain Bolt fast. They just like sprint like they're monk taunted, even though they're not. They just sprint right after the tank, and so it's like really hard for tanks to kite Necrotic to drop stacks. So it's like you have to play a Vengeance Demon Hunter or else you can't handle Necrotic. It's like super hard. So I don't know what they did, but for some reason stuff is super fast. So yeah, going into this pull, we want to focus this Inspiring guy down pretty hard. Although there's not a lot of stuff that's being cast. The only guy who casts in this pack is the Inspired guy, and he's kickable, obviously, so it's not a huge deal that we focus him down, but we are anyway. Plus, if we focus him down, that means that we can Frost Nova or whatever, or CC the little guys like this, so that they stop giving Necrotic stacks to the tank. The tank does manage to drop his Necrotic stacks there by kiting far enough away. But yeah, other than that, I'm just, Searing Nightmare spamming, Shadow Word Deathing as stuff is dying, making sure I stand with Tubbins and Gubbins so I get my mastery increase. It's actually a ton of mastery. Right now my mastery is 16.5% when I'm standing under that umbrella, but when I'm not, it's only 9%, so it almost doubles my mastery when I stand by Tubbins and Gubbins. So it's definitely worth it if you're trying to get any value out of your mastery. It's definitely worth it to stand in there. Obviously, if standing in the shadow is going to kill you, then don't stand in the shadow. But it's a lot like Ring of Power. Is that what it's called? Ring of Power? Rune of Power. It's a lot like Rune of Power for a mage, where standing by it is like really important. It's probably even more important though for a Shadow Priest than Rune of Power is, because like I said, it basically doubles my mastery, which means that instead of doing 9% extra damage to every mob that has per dot on it, I'm doing 16.5% for each dot. So that goes from 27% with all 3 dots to 49.5%, almost 50% increased damage. So it's worth it. This 5-pack, I put Vampiric Touch on everything, and then I'm spamming Searing Nightmare again. We need to kick those Repair Flesh casts from the Flesh Crafters. My Vampiric Touches are starting to fall off, so I'm putting them back on. I stun that guy because he's casting the Gore Splatter thing, which is also pretty important to stop. The Throw Cleaver, if that targets you, you need to point it at either the tank or some trash. Preferably some trash, because it will hit them and do a bunch of damage. I CC this Inspiring guy here, so that we can pull this stuff away. But, and we do manage to pull it far enough away to kick it, so that's nice. And then I'm going to ignore the Inspired guy and just pretty much single target here. You want to dot both things. In a 2-target cleave situation, you want to try and keep all 3 dots up on both targets. But if it comes down to it and you're like insanity starved and you can't manage to keep all 3 dots up on both targets, then you basically just want to focus the one target and try and keep Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on the other. And yeah, so that's basically what I did there. So now we have to wait for some RP. I'm not going to get any value out of Tubbins and Gubbins there. And then these 2 guys come out. This is another time where I would pop both cooldowns, Power Infusion and Void Eruption, because you still have at least 2 minutes before the next boss. Because you have to do this one and then 2 more packs. And you don't need your Power Infusion and Void Eruption back until the boss gets hooked down, at which point you're going to want to have both, because that's the burn phase, right? So this is like the latest that I would use both cooldowns, because any later than this, and you're going to run into a problem with not having them up for the boss. So because I popped both cooldowns, I'm doing pretty good damage, about 6.3k DPS, which is pretty good. But yeah, then other than that, I'm pointing the Throw Cleavers at each other, at the two ads, and then kicking the Drain Fluids or whatever. And then we're moving on to Goregrind. This is a 4-pack, so I should put Vampiric Touch on everything, which I do, which is good. And then I should Searing Nightmare right here, and then I should Shadow Crash. Exactly. So that Shadow Crash got 18% increased damage because everything had 2 dots on it. And then right here I put my Devouring Plague on the big guy before I Mind Games him to get another 9% damage increase to it. So I've played this pack pretty well. as long as I can snipe these guys with Shadow Word Death, I'll have played this pretty well, I'll say. Yeah, so I end up managing to snipe all 3 of those guys. I should be Devouring Plaguing and then Vampiric Touching. I throw out a Shadow Crash, I guess. That should have waited until after the Vampiric Touch, but it's not a huge deal. And then, yeah, we're just going to finish this guy off and move on to the next RP trash pack or whatever. So right there, I Void Torrented as he was dying, which is probably not the best use, but not a huge deal, I guess. So my cooldowns are both back up, Power Infusion and Void Eruption, but I'm not going to use them because I want to save them for, like I said, for the burn phase. And this is the last pack before we go into the boss. There's going to be a Prideful that spawns as soon as we kill all these guys, and this guy has an aura, so if you stand too close to him, you're taking constant damage. It looks like a big disease-looking thing around my screen, but it's not dispellable. You can see the 2 guys on the bottom of my party frames have it right now, and there's nothing you can do about it if you're melee, but because we're not melee, we can just run away. So don't stand too close to those guys, especially because the Mutilate thing is really bad too. He'll spew disease on a random player. There's nothing you can do about that. You just want to make sure it doesn't land anywhere crazy. Right here I was a little too close to the boss guy, so I ran away. Didn't want to pull him accidentally. So I'm going to use my Trinket on this Prideful just to try and help kill it before we go into the boss. The Trinket, it would be nice to save the Trinket for the boss here. Maybe pop Void Eruption instead of using my Trinket. Not Void Eruption, Vampiric Embrace. Just so that I help with the healing in a different way, right? Instead of doing more damage to make the healing less because the thing dies quicker, I could just help heal to make our healer have to heal less. He ends up throwing down his barrier there, so I guess the healing was pretty hard right there. So right here, a lot of people make the mistake of popping all their cooldowns on pull. You don't want to do that. I'm saving my potion, I'm saving everything. So I'm just putting my 3 dots up on this guy, using Mind Blast whenever I can, and then just filling with Mind Flay. I Void Torrent this guy, which is probably a mistake. I should have saved it for the boss right here, because now I'm going to pop everything. Although I guess it's not that big of a deal, because I don't like Void Torrenting during Void Eruption, and I'm going to have my Void Eruption for most of this burn phase. So yeah, I guess it's not that big of a deal that I Void Torrented the big guy. And I think I was actually thinking that while it was happening. Something that we did there, the big guy, you want to keep him alive during this little phase here, up until he casts this second hook. I Shadow Word Death him, which was a big mistake. Had I not Shadow Word Death that guy, that meat hook would have pulled the boss back down, and we would be killing the boss right now instead of fighting this creation dude. That's why you want to keep that other guy alive, is so that you can hook the boss when he does the fixation thing, and then you hook him again when he jumps back up onto the stage, so that you can kill him quicker. He would probably be dead by now, but instead he just barely came down, and now we have to kill him, and it's going to take a little bit longer. So I should not have Shadow Word Deathed the other guy. In fact, I should have just totally left the other guy alone. This is the Morbid Fixation. It gets cancelled by the meat hook, which is nice, but not before it kills our mage, so that's not good. You'll get targeted randomly by Embalming Ichor from the Surgeon Stitchflesh, and when that happens, you need to make sure it lands away from where people are going to be. That's what I mean by hooking the boss after he jumps up on the stage. We left the creation alive long enough to hook him back down. And right here, we're trying to kill this guy as fast as possible because the tank is going to die. So yeah, we managed to kill that guy, and now we're on to the last boss. So we click this portal, it should heal everybody to full, and then we move up to the last boss. So this last boss, you can pop everything on pull, all your cooldowns. You want to position yourself in such a way that if you get targeted by the frozen bindings, something like that, the snare thing, you want to stand in such a way that you're far enough away from everybody that if you do get that on you, it could be instant dispelled and there will be no problem. So right here, I'm in a bad spot. If I had been dispelled instantly, it would have hit the mage, but the mage blinks out pretty quickly, which is good, and I get dispelled really quickly. So I try to stand in like the corner for this boss, but right now I'm just standing kind of right in the middle of everybody, which is not so good. We have a couple instant casts that we can cast while the Comet Storm is happening. So Void Bolts if you're in Void form, and then Shadow Word Pain and Shadow Word Death. So make sure while you're running for that Comet Storm, first off, don't just run like crazy in a straight line at somebody or like across the whole room. You can do a little circle like this, kind of like that, and it makes it pretty easy. And then secondly, while you're running, you can either do 0 DPS by not casting any of your instant casts, or you can do some DPS by spamming Shadow Word Death and Shadow Word Pain. So try to do the second thing, which is spam those two abilities so that you're not doing 0 damage. Also, Shadow Crash is an instant cast, so if you can throw out Shadow Crash while you're running around like that. But it's a little more difficult because I'm usually running with my mouse, and it makes it hard to aim Shadow Crash while you're running around, so it's not a huge deal not to cast it, but it's another option. So the other thing I try to do with that Comet Storm is 2 swirlies will show up before the first swirly hits. So what'll happen is a swirly shows up, you move a little bit, another swirly shows up, and then the first one hits. So what I try to do is one shows up, I move halfway out of it to like right on the edge so that I can overlap the second one, like a Venn diagram, and then I move a little bit to the edge of that one, and the first one goes off. So that takes up a lot less space on the platform. You don't have to run like crazy. You just need to make sure you're not. So you go swirly spawns, you move to the edge of one. Next swirly spawns, you move again. I get hit by a swirly there, which is really bad. And then you just keep doing that so that you can take up less room. I always save my kick for that one Enfeeble cast. I'm not entirely sure what it does, and I don't intend to find out because I'm going to kick it every single time. It should only ever get the one Enfeeble cast off. There's nothing to kick on the boss, so there's no point in ever using your kick here except for that one Enfeeble. So I don't know what it does, but I don't want to be enfeebled, so I use it. I have to drop the thing here. I'm likely to die. I managed to live. I did my desperate prayer or something, so that's a good time to disperse, is when you just came back from the big puddle thing. Especially if you have a really big puddle that's going to drop. It's based on the amount of that frost-looking stack. The amount of stacks you have on that frost-looking debuff at the end of the thing. I tend to usually come up around 6, and the pool is pretty big, so I run it to a corner, or at least to the edge of the room. I usually use dispersion, and I run out. So that's the end of the dungeon. We just killed the boss, so I want to say thanks for watching. Let me know if there's anything you want to see differently, or you want me to, like, maybe some video ideas or anything. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.